Hey, so I realized the last video I made wasn't all that interesting. There's a fine line to be drawn between that which is created out of thin air and that which is created simply to destroy good people. And, the fact that I'm just making videos out of the goodness of my heart, I'm not trying to destroy anybody. I'm just trying to illuminate that which is best for society. Is in and of itself enough for me to continue to be making videos, because as anybody who wants to be a leader, anybody who strives to become a leader at anything, I think nobody wants you to climb the next, I think they call it a rope, in the ladder, or rung. They don't want you to climb the next rung in the ladder. And, and of course you have people who, most people won't say anything, won't do anything, won't bother you, until they're put in a social precipice where they have to make a decision, right? They're either going to be sympathetic towards your position or sympathetic towards the other person's position. And whatever kind of disagreement it is. And, I know a lot of people who, I know a lot of people who, they just avoid debates, they avoid conversation, they avoid recent arguments, they avoid truth. And it's because they're sympathetic towards non-truth like things. And, we all do this. It's just, we've got to sort of pick and choose our battles. And the problem that I find with, most people who want to make it in the world, just like, when they feel as though that they're doing the right thing before they go to bed at night or during the day or not at all, is that you can't judge yourself according to yourself yesterday unless you're also judging other people by that same metric who are judging you. And, it's so that you don't view yourself in isolation. And, because that's what, a victim is, isolated from help. They don't receive help from anybody. They're not allowed to get help from anybody. And I'm not saying, depend on strangers helping you. I'm not saying that's a really bad strategy, and I don't think anyone should do that. Making it on your own is the best thing possible. Then avenues will just open themselves up for you. And, but don't just, I'm just going to wait for the next person to help me, because nobody will ever help you in their right mind. Those people who do will probably stab you in the back. So, let it be a surprise if it ever happens. And, so the best thing I think to do is, if you're striving to, everybody else is evil, fuck off. But, if you're striving to do well, then, if you want to better the world, or at least first you want to better yourself and you want to better those who support you, then, and of course assuming those are moral people, if not, then kick them aside. Then what will happen is you will not be included, right? You will not be included. That's just to be expected. You shouldn't expect to be included in most gatherings, social, all that kind of stuff. Sure. Yeah. I guess you should expect it. Actually, I lay corrected here. But of course not everybody. I don't expect to ever be invited to some kind of rally, some kind of dinner party from a leading Democrat or something. And of course that I shouldn't expect that. And even if I did expect that, I wouldn't go to it. Okay. So. That's something you keep in mind. And the problem with the problem is that there's actually no problems. And it's like inventing something. Philosophy is to be a philosopher, I guess, under the age of 60, you have to be an inventor. You have to be an inventor. And if you're not, then you'll fail, because, a lot of people, they think philosophy is like, oh, you read old books and you maybe listen to audiobooks because, we're in the 21st century, download your ebooks and all that kind of stuff, and maybe, write your own books and all that kind of stuff, and then, only be friends with philosophers, only be friends with the most moral people, and they think that that's philosophy, but that's not the case. Philosophers are inventors, and so, the good ones are, and, being that I'm, not yet the greatest philosopher of all time, however, onwards endeavoring to become the greatest philosopher of all time, I know that it's not an easy journey in that philosophy is going to be, I stand correct, I lay corrected, I am the greatest philosopher of all time. The only problem is that we'd have to define terms, but that's besides the point. Greatest philosopher of all time, you think about that, like, well, what does that mean, right? What does it mean to be the greatest philosopher of all time? And, it's not so much, who's the most popular, it's not so much, who makes the most videos, who makes the most blog posts, who gets most excited, who has sold the most boats, or who has, has the most podcasts, or who's been on the internet with the same website the longest. It's none of those things. To be the greatest philosopher of all time, which, you've come to the right place, you would have to just keep inventing and reinventing until something sticks in a way that is just as winnable of a situation as it can be in a world full of evil, right? So, with evil people, they want to adapt, right? So that's the problem, and that's why the philosopher has to be an inventor and a sort of revolutionary, is that evil wants to adapt. Evil wants to say, okay, you're green at this hour, or you're red at this hour, it's a sort of chameleon, right? So it's a typical sociopath. Then I will reflect that color that you're expecting, a good person to reflect, so that next time you go to eat what that you would presume to be a berry, a blueberry, it turns out to be a poison berry, and then you're dead, right? Or you're significantly poisoned. And that is, that's why philosophers have to constantly reinvent. Now, the thing is, though, is that, if you're a real philosopher, you're not a moral relativist, right? Because a moral relativist is just pandering to politics. If you're a real philosopher, then you actually have first principles, right? Like, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not assault, and thou shalt not rape. And that's, that's philosophy. Now, when you say those four moral statements, immediatly there's going to be a backlash, right? Because there's people I've stolen when I was a kid and such, and a few times when I was an adult, and it's what do you do after you commit a wrong? You have to make restitution. If not, then you're a hypocrite, right? There's got to, right? Unless you don't have the virtue of restitution is, I don't know if making restitution, the accountability, that's not a virtue. I would just say the pursuit of excellence, being a virtue. If you're not in pursuit of excellence, evil can pursue excellence, of course, as well. If you're not pursuing, that's the thing with the virtue and vice, is that, you can have a virtue and then be a bad person or an evil person, and you can have a vice and be, a bad person or an evil person or a good person, etc. Right? It goes both sides of the spectrum. You can have good virtues as equally as an evil person does and be a good person, right? So that's something to keep in mind. So the thing is that, once you define, what is good and what is evil, then immediately people are they're just gonna flip the script, right? They're gonna say, oh, well, you're wrong, or this is why it wasn't wrong, and nobody's going to say, okay, I was wrong, you're right, right? Nobody's gonna actually say that. And so, particularly if you're a philosopher, like nobody's going to come to you and say, yeah, I'm like, you're right, I'm wrong. I mean, maybe anonymously, but like nobody in like, every day face to face is going to come up to you and say that. It's never going to happen. So that is, what is to be expected in the realm of philosophy. Now, of course, keep in mind, because I don't know the sort of, my target audience is not completely projected. So, I mean, when I say everybody, I don't mean nobody will ever come up to you, okay? I mean everybody in the general sense, right? Just in the general sense, the next person you're going to see is going to have 10 fingers and 10 toes. Doesn't mean every single human being has 10 fingers and 10 toes. So just keeping that in mind, you might eventually see a human being on the Guinness World Book of Record, or at some random China shop or some flea market that has 11 fingers and 9 toes or something to that extent, or that'd be more rare, probably even less likely to happen. So just keeping that in mind with how generalities work. And so it's not a a completely absolute syllogistically sound case. Okay, so so it's not. There's just there's some things that should be stated that if you're new to philosophy won't make sense, and so I hope that's somewhat helpful in that regard. So but when it comes to a philosophy that's going to promote virtue, it's not going to be something that anybody is going to agree with. And so that's something to keep in mind, okay? So whenever you make a philosophy, or not make a philosophy, but whenever you find a philosophy or make a philosophy or accept a philosophical truth, then you're going to enlist a lot of anger, hatred, isolation, alienation, because that's really what you have inside of you, right? So, I mean, for example, if I define rape as moral, everybody who believes, who has raped, is going to be completely pissed off, right? Now, they might not say, yeah, I'm pissed off, because X, Y, or Z. They're just going to be pissed off. And, so they might just ignore you. They might try to push you or something if, I guess you're at a bar or something. And so, there's many different reactions that people will take, and most of them will happen under substandard conditions. Like, nobody's going to deliberately say, I'm going to look for someone who's going to claim rape as immoral so I can go after that person. Nobody does that. Those kinds of people, they don't, I mean, those kinds of people are so deranged in terms of their, their sort of cognitive functioning that